Chairwoman, we're now live.
Welcome to the Workforce, Economic, and Development Subcommittee. Today is May 26, 2021. I will be calling this meeting to order. Do we have any call to the public?
Madam Chair, no calls to the public.
Thank you. Minutes of the meetings. Can somebody make a motion for the minutes of the meeting of April 28, 2021? Yes.
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
Waring, in a second. I will second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those not, motion carries. Is Councilman Waring still on the line?
Yes, Councilman Waring is on the line.
I didn't see his symbol, that's why. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Information only, items 2 and 3. Does anybody need anything? Okay, I am going to go out of order. Item 5 will go first, and then item 4 will go next. For whatever reason, the packet was printed this way, and so we're going to move item 5 first.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman Pastor. For item number 5, which is on the downtown absorption study, as well as the GPLET, we have Christine Mackey joining us, as well as Joseph McKeown. Will you please make sure to pronounce his last name correctly, because I think I just butchered it. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We are here today to continue the conversation with you and follow the direction of the Workforce and Economic Development Subcommittee on our downtown absorption information and to provide you an update on the studies that we've done. With me today is Joseph McKeown, Project Manager for Community Development here in downtown. Joseph, can you walk us through, actually, if I might provide a little briefing, Madam Chair, you will remember at your March 24th subcommittee meeting, the subcommittee asked us to go back and bring additional information forward relating to our downtown residential and commercial absorption. That direction was to use multiple sources to find the information, which we did do. We worked through information with Census, with Maricopa Association of Governments, with Apartment Insights, with data that we had within our own organization on projects. We worked with information from ASU, and then with a very small contract with Rounds Consulting, who pulled all the information together for us, and I believe found a number of very good nuggets for you to consider today. So Joseph is going to walk us through the overview and outcomes of that study. Joseph?
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Chair, members of the subcommittee. Before we get into the presentation, as you see before you, we do have a lot of content to cover today. As Chris mentioned, I will give an overview of the downtown residential and commercial absorption rate study, and then we will get into an overview of GPLET, workforce housing, and ultimately community benefits. For the downtown residential and commercial absorption rate study, we first wanted to give a brief update and overview of downtown development, an update from the last presentation we gave you. For recently completed projects, we have some updates. So as you can see before you, there are 8 projects. A few of them are residential, so the Ryan, the McKinley, and Connect Phoenix. There's some commercial space with PBC Innovation Center and Phoenix Forge. We have hotel rooms with AC Hotel by Marriott. And we have key amenities that recently completed, like the Fiesta Bowl play at Hance Park, and of course the renovation at the Phoenix Suns Arena. For projects currently under construction, we have 17. The first 2 rows are residential, representing around 2,700 residential units. As you can see in the 3rd row, we have student housing with ASU Innovation Dorm. We have hotel rooms with Home 2 Suites and Hyatt Place. We have the Thunderbird School of Global Management and we have a significant renovation of the Ellis Building. And with even all that under construction, there is more planned. We do see around 9 projects on the slide before you, representing around an additional 2,000 residential units planned. Some of these projects, I should note, also plan to bring in significant commercial space. So with that, we will get into the absorption rate study itself. To give some context on the boundary, the update on the previous slides that I just gave was for the more concentrated downtown core, between the 7s, as we like to address it. At this subcommittee's direction, for the absorption rate study, the boundary you see before you is what was used. So it is a wider boundary that goes from 19th Avenue to 16th Street. So over the next few slides, when I refer to downtown, I'm referring to this boundary, just for ease of understanding.
And Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, also at your direction, you'll remember the southern boundary was Jefferson and the northern boundary was McDowell.
So the first key finding was that there is strong demand for multifamily housing in the downtown area. To illustrate that, we looked at the absorption rate, which is the rate at which available units are occupied. And as you can see, for downtown, significantly higher percentage at just over 3% as compared to 0.6% for the Phoenix MSA and 0.7% for the city of Phoenix. So much higher demand for multifamily housing in downtown. The second key finding is that downtown residents prioritize living near an employment center. The way we looked at that was the percentage of residents who walk, bike, or ride share to work. As you can see, downtown, again, a significantly higher percentage at just over 15%. Phoenix MSA at 5%, City of Phoenix at 3.9%. So much higher percentage of residents in downtown Phoenix want to live in close proximity to their jobs so that they can choose to walk, bike, or ride share. The third key finding is that demand for multifamily housing continues to exceed supply for the city. So this slide is on the city of Phoenix. To look at that, we look at the rise in rental rates followed by a decline in the vacancy rate. There are a lot of numbers there before you, but I'll walk you through exactly how we illustrate that. So over the last year, in the city of Phoenix, there was an increase of 1,400 units. The current average rent, according to CoStar, for units, multifamily units in Phoenix is just over $1,100 per month. That is an annual increase over the last year of around 8.8%. The current vacancy rate for those units in Phoenix is 5.8%. That is an annual decrease of 1.1%. So when you see an increase in the supply, so we saw 1,400 units, followed by a rise in the rental rates and a decrease in the vacancy rate, you are seeing demand exceed supply, and that is for the city of Phoenix. Moving now to downtown, the fourth key finding is that downtown multifamily is in higher demand than the overall city, and that remains strong. The first way to illustrate that is to look at the number of units currently under construction. So in the city of Phoenix, there are 9,200 units currently under construction. 3,300 of those units, or 36%, are in downtown. I'll pause and note this number is different again from the under construction slide we presented earlier, only because we have now expanded the boundary for these few slides for the purposes of the study. So 36% of all units under construction in the city of Phoenix are in downtown. Another way to illustrate that, similar to the previous slide, is looking at the increase in supply, vacancy rate, and rental rates. So in 2019, downtown saw an increase in its multifamily supply of nearly 20%, very significant increase. However, since then, the vacancy rate has declined by 7.2%, and the rental rate has increased by 3.6%. Again, similar to the previous point, when you see a significant increase in the supply and yet the vacancy rate continues to decline and the rental rate continues to increase, you are seeing much higher demand than supply, and that remains strong for downtown. The fifth key finding in the next few slides will move into employment. So downtown has a high concentration of high-paying employers. This is a point that I know Chris has made many times before you, and I'm sure that you are aware of. But a couple key findings looks at some key industries. So within the information technology industry, downtown's employment within that industry represents nearly 19% of the entire city of Phoenix's employment within that industry, all right here in downtown. Similarly, for the professional, scientific, and technical services, that represents 19% of the entire city of Phoenix's employment just in downtown. And for this industry, we're talking about companies that provide legal, accounting, even engineering services, so a variety of companies. And overall, downtown's employment contains nearly 10% of all the city's employment. A continuation of that point, we also looked at the wages for these industries. So the top 3 paying industries within downtown are before you: professional services, finance and insurance, and information technology. These 3 industries around $80,000 in annual wages, so very high-paying industries. We also wanted to look at the density of jobs within downtown. So for the city of Phoenix, there are 44 employees per 100 residents, but for downtown, that is 288 employees per 100 residents. Much higher concentration, density of employment here in downtown. And where overall are all these jobs located? So we've talked about a couple of those industries. What you see before you is a breakdown of the majority of the industries that these jobs represent. Of no surprise to us, public administration is there at the top, and is also as a result of the expanded boundary moving west to 19th Avenue. But you see next to arts and entertainment, information technology, healthcare, and so on. And to reiterate, overall, this employment represents nearly 10% of all of Phoenix's employment. And finally, we wanted to look at the office market and give a brief update. What you see before you is a chart of construction starts, new office construction in downtown since the year 2000. The total office market now is around 13.5 million square feet. The vacancy rate is around 13.5%, which is very consistent with our comparable office markets. The rent is around $29 per square foot. And as the chart is illustrating, since the year 2000, 2.9 million square feet of office space has been added to downtown. And with that, that covers our findings from the absorption rate study, and I will hand it back to Chris.
Madam Chair, members, excuse me, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Next, we'll walk through a chiplet overview of our project. So first,
Chris,
yes, ma'am.
I would like to know if anybody has any questions. I hear none.
Matt,
Go ahead, Barry.
sorry, there it is. So I will just point out, bike lanes I brought up last time, people wrote me, oh, there are people who ride their bikes between Tempe and Phoenix. Yes, undoubtedly there are some people who ride bikes between Tempe and Phoenix, for example, but not very many of them in relation to the whole population. So there was one of your slides talked about the number of people who bike to work downtown. And if you got 3% of the people living downtown and 15% of those bike to work, you're talking about like 7,500 people out of 1.7 million plus Phoenicians. So my point at the last meeting, not to belabor it, was, we like to build expensive stuff that lots of people will use, not just a few people will use. And we want to get a lot of bang for our buck when we make fairly extensive expenditures. So even though the number of people living downtown has grown, it's still a minuscule percentage of the number of people who actually live in Phoenix. And then the transportation thing becomes a subset of that. So just want to, for those who watched the meeting last time, this will make sense. For others, it won't make any sense. But I just wanted to respond to those new numbers. Thanks.
And then, thank you, Councilman Waring. Councilwoman Stark, you have any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. In the absorption study, we expounded the boundary. And so in the expansion, I would assume that it's not, in the expansion, it's from McDowell all the way to 19th Avenue to Jefferson. That whole area is of homes on the west side and some government, a little bit of government. So I could see why the public administration is up, because we pulled in some of the government mall. And why that would be because of the expansion of the boundary. If we originally left it the way it was, it obviously would be completely different and the numbers wouldn't be as great. So, so we just have to keep that in mind when we're saying downtown, because downtown is a certain boundary. And then this is a different boundary. There's an overlay of this boundary. Am I correct, Chris?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, you are exactly correct. So our normal boundaries that we consider downtown would be between the Sevens, McDowell to Buckeye, to include the warehouse district. So we call downtown a much smaller area. Madam Chair, you are exactly right. We expanded that by 9 streets to the east to get to 16th Street. And more importantly, to your comment, we expanded it 12 streets to the west, which does go into the Capitol Mall area. It brings in, all the state government. It brings in significantly more of the county government. It brings in a lot more of an area that we, for the absorption study, expanded the area. So you are dead spot on.
Right, because when we go to the east, now we've added Good Sam, we added the Science Center, we added the schools, Garfield neighborhood. It's very different if we did the Sevens to the Sevens. And in the absorption study, I think it was good to expand. But when we say downtown, we're talking from in between the Sevens, from McDowell to the warehouse district. And that's a different type of conversation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Madam Chair, you are correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, here we go.
Right. So, Madam Chair, the next part of the conversation we'll have is about the tool known as Government Property Lease Excise Tax, or GPLET. So just while I know you and the members of the council know all of the details about GPLET, for our viewers, I thought I would take just a quick walkthrough about what it is. So it was authorized in the mid-1990s as an economic development tool by the state legislature. And the reason it was created is government-owned properties are not subject to a property tax. What the tool was created for was the ability to help redevelopment areas turn back into more vibrant areas, as well as the ability to collect tax from private entities who lease property from the government. The excise tax becomes a substitute to the property tax because if we own a government property, we do not pay property tax. Without GPLET, a tax on those properties would be zero. GPLET's used in, yes.
I'm sorry. What do you mean by that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back in the history just a little bit for you. In the 1980s, cities used their leverage of owning properties to bring in redevelopment into their cities by luring companies to come in on city-owned properties. Because cities don't pay a property tax, privately held companies would build buildings on city-owned properties and never have to pay property tax. That item was modified in the mid-1990s to say, to create GIPLET, which then said, okay, if the government owns the property, you don't have to pay property tax on the land, but if the private development community builds a private development on the property, there is now a mechanism by which to tax them, which is the government property lease excise tax, which is that excise tax that was created.
Okay, I just wanted to get that on the record, and also for the audience to understand, or constituents to understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I also think, maybe I should not say anything, but I also feel there are government entities that expanded their growth on their property because there was no property tax, and that went to the legislature. But that's what I wanted to get on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. GIPLET is used in two different ways. So the first will go into a little bit of detail expanding on the conversation Councilwoman Pastor just brought forward, and that is a tax on non-government uses on government property. So even today, as an example, let's say you are our convention center and the city owns the convention center, but we have private sector tenants who lease space within the convention center through leases with the city. GIPLET is used, or payment in lieu of tax is used, to ensure that those private sector tenants pay a rate to the city of Phoenix on that property tax. Again, there is no property tax. We own the building and all the improvements, but any leases that happen inside the convention center either use GIPLET as an excise tax, or they use payment in lieu of taxes to cover that private sector. It's also used at our airport that way. So inside the fence on properties that the city owns, we have private sector tenants who have built large facilities. Their leases accommodate for either a GIPLET excise tax paid on that property or a payment in lieu of taxes that are paid on that property. So it is the way in today's world that government property produces a tax on private sector using their property. The second is the way that we use it for the most part here in downtown, and that is as a redevelopment tool. And that is where we have the items that come forward for development agreement for downtown Phoenix when we are executing those strategies to bring forward redevelopment in downtown Phoenix. That does allow for up to an 8-year abatement of the property tax before it is placed on the full ad valorem property tax rolls. So what I mean by that is downtown Phoenix, and now we're talking about the downtown Phoenix proper that the councilwoman brought forward to us just a few minutes ago, not the absorption area of downtown, but the area that is between is the downtown Phoenix. That is a redevelopment area, the downtown redevelopment area, and a central business district. So to receive 100% property tax abatement for up to 8 years, the property has to be located in the redevelopment area and a central business district. The improvements to the property mean it has to improve the value of the property by 100%. And what I mean by that, if it's raw land that's worth $10 million, the new development on it must improve the value of the property to $20 million plus one, so 100% improvement plus $1. Taxing jurisdictions are provided notice of the potential of council to consider an item, and every one of these items is subject to council approval in a public venue. Our two options that we have to use is an abatement of property tax for 8 years, or applying the excise tax for up to a 25-year maximum in that area. As we have moved forward, we began using GIPLET in the mid-1990s. We continue to use it today, but with the council's guidance and direction, we always look at that changing market and the changing focus of the strategies of the council, of the community, and of the market to see how we can best leverage tools that we have at council's discretion to use. And we are in a place bringing this item forward to the subcommittee. We're looking at those changing market focuses and having those discussions all the time. The second mechanism by which to use GIPLET is in a non-central business district area.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, may I ask a question? I apologize.
Of course.
Thank you. So when you talk about changing market, could you use an example? And I think the example would be that we now look at a percentage of affordable housing, and I know the chair kind of led the charge on that, but could you give us a couple examples? Thank you.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Stark. We look at it from a multitude of different fashions. So number one is with council's guidance and direction, and we'll talk about this in just a few moments. A number of years ago, council was an early adopter of concern about the price point of development in downtown Phoenix and ensuring that all of our citizens could have the option of living within the market. And they began to, at council's guidance, we began to require workforce housing as part of our projects for anything that did consider, that council considered that tool to use with. We have added into it public parking. We've added into it other public amenities and open space. So just depending on the community's guidance and council's thoughts and where we're at in the market, if we look back to the beginning of our GIPLET, we used a GIPLET on virtually all the hotels that built in downtown Phoenix. The city, under the city council's guidance, created a $600 million investment in our convention center back in 2008 to 2010. And that really became the city's incentive for our hotels in downtown Phoenix. And so we have used the GIPLET very lightly on hotels since that time. The one that this council has considered in 2020 was to save a historic building in the warehouse district, where the saving of the historic building actually met the same value as the GIPLET to the developer. So council very thoughtfully looks at that changing market focus and is always weighing, bringing new, and of course to your position, Councilwoman Stark, on our most recent one, the developer actually offered, it was the developer offered some affordable housing in the project as well. So again, a contribution to affordable housing in the project. So I would commend our council that we're always looking at this tool based on where the market needs are today. And number two is, does the market even need this tool anymore in order to develop?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Stark. And next, the tool is not available just in the central business district and the redevelopment area, but the way that the statute is written is it makes it an economic development tool in redevelopment areas as well. So the city outside of the downtown redevelopment area in the central business district has 13 additional redevelopment areas. So if a property is located entirely within a redevelopment area, again, the same applications apply of adding value and council notice and the taxing jurisdictions, but it is a tool that the council can use to bring workforce housing, kind of that missing middle that we've talked about in workforce housing, into other areas of redevelopment areas of Phoenix. So what happens then is it is not a property tax abatement, but a statutory excise tax is applied per square footage depending on the type of development. So if we look at multifamily, and I'm going to get the number wrong, but the last number I looked at in the legislative guidance for 2020, I believe, was 58 cents a square foot for multifamily. So instead of full ad valorem property tax, the development community knows they have a certainty in what that property tax is going to be when they build, and they can use that excise tax instead of full ad valorem property tax for up to 25 years to help advance some of the council goals and the community goals to get redevelopment in other areas of the city as well. It's important to note that abatement is not an option in the rest of the city in redevelopment areas, but instead the excise tax tool is applied.
Chris,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on slides 20 and 21, and they're just, one is, could a property owner sell the property after an 8-year abatement period? And I have 3 actually. Can you give an example of a rate of excise tax versus a property tax rate? And can you list, or can we get a list of the different redevelopment areas in the city?
Madam Chair, all very good questions. I'll start with the first and work my way to the third. So in the first, yes, a developer could, at the end of the development agreement, the restrictions on the development agreement, sell the property. The property at the end, at the beginning of the 9th year, is placed on full ad valorem property tax rolls. So whoever is buying the property would buy it with the knowledge that the property was being placed on full ad valorem property tax rolls, but nothing would restrict the developer at the end of the GIPLET period from selling that property to another buyer, but it would not stop the property from moving on to full ad valorem property tax rolls. Second,
Chris, hang on. In this 8-year period, can an owner transfer it to another owner within those 8 years?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, within our development agreements, if they choose to sell or transfer that to another entity that is not closely or widely held by the group that has the development agreement with us, it does require the authorization of the city to be able to sell that property, because we need to know who we're doing business with, number one. And number two, our development agreements do require a financial contribution to the city should the city grant its approval for that transfer.
Thank you.
And then finally, Madam Chair, we will take care of immediately getting you a copy of all of the other redevelopment areas. We'll bring a map to all the council offices so you can see where they reside.
Okay, can you just give me an example of a rate of an excise tax versus property tax rate?
Yes, ma'am, and they're done differently. So you have multifamily, you have office, you have retail, you have hotels, and they all have a different excise tax rate that goes along with them. In the analyses that I have completed, and you and I have had discussions on previously, and I always thank you for the good conversation on truly diving deeply into the data. All of the areas, the excise tax exceeds what a property would pay on full ad valorem property tax. So for office, my analysis shows for office, for hotel, for retail, for other uses, a GIPLET would not be beneficial for those uses, even in redevelopment areas and even with the benefits that go along with those redevelopment areas. The excise tax that the legislature set in 2010, which then appreciates by a producer price index on an annual basis, has exceeded where full ad valorem property tax has grown to. When we look at multifamily, that's one that in our most recent analysis still shows that there could be a benefit to the development community. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you exactly what that would be, 58 cents versus 70 cents, but I'll tell you on a project by project basis. So my analysis, and I'll get the exact numbers to you because I'll do them by square footage following this meeting and provide that to you and the subcommittee members. But in our most recent analysis, if you did a 300-unit multifamily project on 18 acres in a redevelopment area, you would still see a benefit of about $100,000 a year using the GIPLET redevelopment tool over full ad valorem property tax. So in the 25-year period, you would be estimated to see a $2.5 million benefit, which could let the development community risk their capital in an unknown area and helping revitalize an area because they know that that $2.5 million benefit over time leverages against their rate of return, and the risk would be worth the reward.
Thank you.
And next slide, please. Madam Chair, the staff also looked back at the financial impacts of utilizing GIPLET in our downtown market since the mid-1990s. And what we've seen out of that is close to 18,000 new permanent jobs, about $1 billion of payroll, $3 billion in construction capital investment, $35 million in construction sales tax, $17 million in ongoing annual tax impact, about $99 million to our school districts, and $250 million to the state of Arizona. Councilwoman? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. When you say school districts, 99.2 million, this is after the 8-year, because what I'm hearing from school districts, in particular in the school district around the downtown area, is that they're not seeing, that they don't see the benefit till years later when the need is now.
Yes, ma'am, and it's a complicated explanation, so I'll do my best here. So since 2016, the 8-year abatement is the only benefit that the GIPLET receives. So the GIPLET's always by our state legislature is a changing tool. When it first started in 1996, there was not a cap on the years by which the GIPLET could be offered. That cap came about in 2010, and the legislature brought forward a 25-year cap. And in 2016, that cap changed to 8 years. So if we go back to 1996 and come forward, the 8-year abatement in the entire period of time has always existed. So the GIPLETs in the early 1990s and in the early 2000s would see an 8-year of abatement, and then they would move on to an excise tax. And they would pay that excise tax during their GIPLET term of their development agreement. And I wasn't here then, but you go back and look at the analysis and you can see how that works. And so the school districts received an excise tax in lieu of their full ad valorem property tax. In 2009, the legislature changed the education equalization program by which to say that if a school district existed in a school district where GIPLETs were offered, the education equalization that all schools receive to make sure that they have their balanced budget would no longer apply on properties that have a GIPLET, and the properties that have a GIPLET would be assumed to be paying full ad valorem property tax. So that changed the analysis a bit for our school districts. When I came in 2014, the council was concerned about that change that happened in 2009, and the council gave me direction to work with the development community to have the development community pay to the school district an amount that would hold the school district harmless in that formula, which has been done since 2014. In 2010 to 2016, the 8-year abatement still existed, and businesses then could receive, the school district then received the excise tax from years 9 through 25. Those that have come into play since 2016 are an 8-year abatement, and they move immediately onto full ad valorem property tax. As an example, and so the tool used to have a very long tail, Councilwoman, and I think that's why you're hearing that from our school district colleagues, is that it used to have a very long tail. As an example, the Arizona Center property, that when it went on to, it started on pilot and moved to GIPLET on 1996. It used to have a property tax that was paid on it of $130,000 before the development happened on it. So that used to be houses and industrial buildings and commercial development. When it came off of the GIPLET in 2011, it now pays just over $3 million a year in property taxes to all taxing jurisdictions. So the development is slow to happen to benefit the school districts. When the projects come off of GIPLET, they do provide significant benefit to our all taxing jurisdictions, of which the school districts receive that lion's share of that. And we work closely, as you do, with those school districts. We had a great conversation with Phoenix Elementary, of which the entire downtown market is within Phoenix Elementary boundaries, just this last week, and did a refresher course with them and had a good conversation. We're going to start back up our monthly meetings with Phoenix Elementary School District so we can keep them apprised of everything that's happening in downtown.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Okay.
Madam Chair, we thought, and with your guidance, you thought it was important, and we agreed with you, to show those projects that we've been showing you through the downtown absorption that have received a GIPLET from the City of Phoenix through our process and are on a GIPLET today. And those properties are in front of you. Some of them will see just an 8-year abatement of the property tax, and then we'll move on to the full ad valorem property tax. In fact, all of those projects, as we've talked about since 2016, will see just the 8-year abatement, and then we'll move on to a full ad valorem property tax.
So Chris, on this slide 23,
Yes.
They've received a GIPLET. What was the community benefit for each one?
I will do my best to
You
walk.
know?
Yeah, I believe I do. I'll do my best to walk through those each for you today. So if we start with Block 23, so Block 23, the negotiations and the development agreement for Block 23 happened in 2015. The community at that time, their number one priority was to bring in a grocery store into downtown Phoenix. So in working with the developer of this particular project, that was to get, this was, as you'll remember, was a city parking lot with the oldest underground parking garage on it in existence in downtown Phoenix. The community benefit to this was to get a full grocery store in downtown Phoenix. Of course, it is a Fry's today, and there is a beautiful open space and pass-through that happens between the commercial office portion and Ryan in the area. So that was a grocery store. Connect Phoenix was an older GIPLET. It was negotiated before I got here, Councilwoman, in fact, before even you or Councilwoman or the council members on this meeting today were on the council. So that was part of a former agreement. I will share with you that what I did negotiate on that agreement, because I came in 2014, we renegotiated this in 2015. I negotiated out the hotel component. It was supposed to receive a GIPLET by the previous agreements. Our team did negotiate out the hotel on that, and so the apartments were what received that GIPLET. On the Battery, the community benefit was to draw development into, and again, this was before, it came from 2015, it was before the council's guidance on the workforce housing, but this was to really create the connection between downtown and the warehouse district, which at the time in 2014 and 15 was a pretty challenging walk to get from the redevelopment we were seeing starting in downtown into the warehouse district. So this has really acted as the liaison between downtown and the warehouse district. Ex-Phoenix, which was, again, it was an older development agreement negotiated prior to any of us being on in our roles we are today. It was community benefit, was co-working space and open space that was on the project. Aspire Fillmore was 8% workforce housing and 34 public parking places. The Adeline was a much older development agreement that had already started under Collier's and it just continued that development agreement. So Adeline was previous, again, long before any of us were on here. Home 2 Suites saved the historic Fuller Warehouse building, and that will now be the lobby of that particular hotel. The Link, which is a Link Phase 1, which is on a different slide, and then Link Phase 2, which is under construction today, both provide 5% of workforce housing. And, Councilmember, you'll remember originally we asked for 5% and we moved to 10% of workforce housing. So they do provide 5% of workforce housing. They are large projects, so workforce housing is in the 30s for a number of years. Palm Court, ex-Base Camp, and Sky on Phoenix, Sky on 6th are 10% of workforce housing that happen inside those projects. And then Sky on 6th, at the developer's discretion, made a $100,000 deposit to the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Chris, ex-Phoenix and Palm Court, that was workforce housing, or what was it?
Yeah, so ex-Phoenix was negotiated before any of us got here, but ex-Phoenix Base Camp, which was negotiated, in fact, that was one of your most recent GIPLETs that came forward, is 10% workforce housing, as is Palm Court.
Thank you. Because I guess what I want to say with the fries, the benefit wasn't necessary. Well, it was to fill a void of being able to get access to food as a grocery store. But I would also say what it did is brought jobs to downtown. So that was, I would say, the community benefit.
Madam Chair, you are absolutely right. So it brought jobs into our wonderful Fry's grocery store, but the 220,000 square feet of new and modern office space that is Block 23 is 100% occupied. It was very much in demand space and has brought several thousand jobs into that building, also to the restaurants and retailers that are on the ground floor of the entire Block 23. It was a very successful community benefit project. And to your point, Madam Chair, I think it is important to note the grocery store wasn't just for downtown, because it does have a stop on light rail, as you know, downtown and the surrounding communities, as you go east on Washington and Jefferson and south on Central and west on Washington. It is a food desert. And that was one of the council's goals and strategies, was to solve for that food desert. And we really believed with Fry's and not doing zone pricing, meaning that if you pay 99 cents for a head of romaine in Goodyear, you pay 99 cents for a head of romaine in downtown Phoenix, was critically important in solving that food desert.
Thank you.
Next, we'll talk through those projects with workforce housing, which we have just done very, very well in our conversation. So I'll make this just a little bit shorter. As you saw, link 1, 2, and 3. 1 is completed, 2 is under construction, and 3 will be coming right behind it, are those workforce housing. Now, Central Station is on this slide. Central Station did not receive a GIPLET. Central Station is the development that is being constructed on our Central Station project at Central and Van Buren. That's a lot of Centrals all right in a row there. That project is fenced up and getting ready to start construction. At the council's request, the developer did offer 7% of workforce housing for a 15-year period of time, and they are not receiving a GIPLET benefit. Workforce housing to them was something important to solve, particularly related to our education and our school teachers here in the Central City, and giving them a great place to live close to where they worked. If we look at our workforce housing numbers, what we do is we don't just, now we're going to even throw in another boundary for you. We don't just look at in what we call inside the box, as Councilman Waring and I have great conversations about the people that live in the box and work inside the box. So now we're outside the box and we're in commute rings. And we look at the robust investments that the city of Phoenix has made in transportation, in our buses and in our light rail, and other mechanisms by which people commute into work. And so we use, as we did in 2016 and again in 2018, the exact same boundaries. And we look at a 1 mile radius, a 3 mile radius, and a 5 mile radius. And the reason we look at the 5 mile radius is that is a 15-minute commute to work. And we consider that a very reasonable commute into coming into work. And at council, as council so thoughtfully keeps its finger on the pulse of a market of housing becoming unaffordable for all of our workforce, which we read about in the newspaper and we see in our own communities on a daily basis. The numbers in front of you are an update to 2021 of the market rate, which is green, the workforce, which is blue, and I think it's important to note workforce is 80 to 120% of the area median income, and the blue is 80% and below of the area median income. And what our analysis shows, as it did in 16 and 18, is we consider 30% of your income can be spent on your domicile, whether it's rent, whether it's a house payment, and that's how we kind of follow HUD's analysis in determining that affordability. So you'll see in that 1 mile radius downtown, and we knew that was happening. We knew with the projects that we've seen happening, market, when we all got together in 2014, those numbers were very much in line. The market rate is taking over that within the mile radius. Within a 3 mile radius, we come into a much better balance of market, workforce, and affordable. And when we move into that 15-minute commute, which goes, all the way out to, all the way out to Metro Center, it goes all the way to South Phoenix and to East Phoenix and into West Phoenix, you see those numbers shift just a little bit. And so as we look at the health of our market, these are numbers that staff keenly focuses on and working closely with council and following council's strategic plan of 50,000 new housing units by 2035 and focusing on that affordability nature of our housing. And we'll keep these numbers updated for you on a constant basis. Madam Chair, earlier in the discussion, you mentioned those community benefits and what these projects have brought to bear. And I think we've discussed those as we've gone through the presentation, so I won't belabor what those items would be. So, Madam Chair, with that, staff concludes its presentation, and we'd love to take any questions you might have and further direction that you would have on additional information you would like us to bring back to this subcommittee or to future City Council discussion. So thank you for your time today, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee.
So Chris, I have a question on 29, slide 29. What are some examples of other community benefits would we leverage or require? Some thoughts, but can you provide examples of other community benefits required in other jurisdictions?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you for that question. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So as we look at other communities around the country and what those community benefits that they receive, first I want to set the guidance with the fact that government property lease excise tax is very unique to Arizona. The other 49 states across the country use a program called tax increment financing, or TIF. And so they get a property tax benefit dollar for dollar on the public improvements and the improvements that they do to the project. And so TIF and GIPLET are used similarly, but are vastly different tools in how they are leveraged. So as we look at other communities around the country, other communities have leveraged it to bring affordable housing to their communities, and that is 80% and below in area median income. They have used it to benefit public open spaces and parks for areas within that benefit area that the city might otherwise not have an ongoing operation or maintenance to provide for, not only for the initial construction of that public open space, a park, but also for the ongoing operation and maintenance of that public space. They have leveraged it to create community space, whether it is a senior center or programs for youth, and it is on an ongoing basis until that benefit sets aside in those communities. They've leveraged it to create public infrastructure. So it is a vast array of tools that other cities that we researched across the country have leveraged the tax increment financing or additional additional city offerings to benefit projects to bring that mutually beneficial benefit back to the citizens of the city.
Councilwoman Stark.
Thank you, and thanks for pointing that out, Chris. That's what I was going to mention, is we don't have some of the tools that other states have, and I think the city of Chicago has really benefited from TIFs, especially with their open space and the parks that they have. But could you maybe just expand on where is the boundary for our workforce housing and how we've used it with the GPLET?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Stark, if I could clarify, you're talking about how we've used the boundary for our workforce housing for the projects that have been required to do that as part of the development agreement?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yes, ma'am. So that is, that would be McDowell on the north, 7th Avenue on the west, 7th Street on the east, and approximately Jackson on the south.
Thank you, because that's a little bit different than what the study you did on absorption rates. So you really focused in on the redevelopment areas. So I appreciate that. I thought we should probably clarify that. Can you, I've seen the good uses of GPLETs. I mean, they've really done a lot for our downtown area, but what are the potential negatives, in your opinion?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, as we look at utilizing the GPLET tool, I think some of the negatives, of course, are the conversation that we often have as to whether the development would build it on its own without GPLET. And I have had hundreds of conversations with people, over the last 2 decades of my life, as to whether that development would happen with or without the benefit. We do, as Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee know, we run an extensive financial analysis on any project that we bring forward to GPLET. In fact, we have 22 GPLETs within the city. So it's we talk about them a lot, but there's not that many of them. For those projects, in our professional opinion, those projects would not get built without the GPLET. Now, there are 2 instances where staff had recommended GPLET and both projects built even without the GPLET. And to clarify that, both of those projects had already spent an amount that was very close to or exceeded their GPLET benefit when they found out on that property, when they found out that the GPLET benefit would not be provided to them. So they were really at a break even. It wasn't, we could have the GPLET and okay, we didn't get it, so we're gonna go forward without it because we really didn't need it. They'd already spent the amount of money on their projects to that time in the consideration of the GPLET. So it really was a level playing field that they were facing there. I think some of the others, and Councilwoman Pastor brought that up, is of course always the greatest negative and concern is the perception of the harm to our school district. So in our property tax, our school districts get about just over 70% of our property tax benefits. So working diligently to do our very best to not harm our school districts. But as we have that conversation and we think to moving forward, as we look at what could develop without it, which is our 4 and 5 story stick, as opposed to the benefit in 8 years when these come off of the GIPlet, as we use the example of the Arizona Center. It's that, and I know that it troubles council, and I know it's that really weighs heavily in your considerations as to particularly related to our schools and how that benefits our schools.
Thank you. And just one last question. So, I walk around downtown Phoenix and there's all kinds of construction, a lot of cranes. So do you think we really need GPLETs for the future? Is it still an effective tool? Thank you, Madam Chair. That's my question.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Stark, that's, as we started in the beginning, as we talked about that changing market focus, that is something as we move forward that staff is constantly weighing, much like we did for hotels back in 2014, looking at them and what the community had already brought to them, which was the investment in the convention center and the investment of light rail and all these other advantages. We are at in 2014, as you know, and 15 and 16, I would have fought mercilessly for GIPlet and benefiting multifamily. We are getting very close to where the costs of construction meet the rents that are commanded to do high-rise residential, which is called for in the city's general plan. And as we know, construction that happens in multifamily, 18 acres, that 300 units we talked about before, in a greenfield development is somewhere between $125 and $150 a square foot, and in high-rise steel, concrete construction in very challenging markets with structured parking, it's somewhere between $300 and $400 a square foot. Our rents are getting close to being able to support that type of a development. We are continuing to analyze that information. As of right now, in our most recent analysis, the market still has not tipped in the favor of not using GIPlet for that use, but we continue to grow very, very close on that level. On office, we are light years away from that happening. And the reason being is replacement cost rents of office development today are $48 a square foot. So what that means is to cover your debt service for a new high-rise office building you build, you'd have to be able to command $48 a square foot in rents. As you saw from one of the previous slides that my colleague showed you, the rents currently commanded in downtown Phoenix are $29 a square foot. Where we see a lot of new office space being built in Metro Phoenix in high-rise style, they're able to command higher rents than we can. Our 2 new and modern office spaces, which is our Wexford 850 PBC and Block 23, are able to command closer to the $48 a square foot in rents, but still not quite there. So in office, I would state that it's still an absolute tool, and without that tool, high-rise office will not build in downtown Phoenix. On hotels, I think we passed it. On residential, I think we're very close.
Thank you. Anyone else before I go to the speakers?
Councilwoman Stark, I say
Yes.
something?
Sure.
Thank you. So, Chris, I won't belabor it. We've talked about this publicly many times and also privately. I side with I don't think we needed the giblets. And even if you would argue that it's caused good projects, which I would say that's an arguable point, but there are some nice projects downtown that have used this tool, if that's what you want to call it. Again, the market for people moving downtown, it's 3% of the city's population has chosen to live downtown. People aren't rushing to live downtown. The people who live downtown will probably tweet and defend and say we should be investing a lot in downtown. I just don't understand why we limit ourselves with that thinking. It's nice to have a downtown, I guess, but that hasn't been the way Phoenix has evolved. And so to focus so much on the boundaries that have been prescribed for this, I just think is not looking at the full picture of what could be done in Laura Pastor's district that she represents, or the Desert Ridge area, or something that I represent. I just think that concentrating down here, where you haven't really seen people flocking down here, even though it's increased. I mean, it's got a long way to go before it's even close to being as attractive as what you see, frankly, in the area I represent. So I never understand how this division of resources came to be, exactly what the genesis of it was. But I just think it's not been the best public policy, because it hasn't tracked what apparently Phoenicians want. People go live where they want to live. And I don't know why we're trying to incentivize them or incentivize development in places that they haven't gone to naturally. They just haven't. And they continue to not. I mean, even if it's going up, it's still not going up at as fast a rate as other places. So you put in lots of bike lanes downtown, you can't make people live downtown, and you can't make people ride in the bike lanes when they do live downtown. Maybe we should put some of this stuff where the people actually live right now. Maybe we should support businesses that are already here right now. So just my 2 cents worth. I appreciate the discussion, and certainly an interesting topic. I do think one thing, Chris, that you and I have talked about, and I think Ginger as well, is that it would be nice to have sort of clarity. Are we doing this going forward? And I think that's probably part of this exercise. We haven't really had this discussion before, other than really me spouting off about it since I was in the state Senate, really. We haven't really had a full scope discussion about that, and it looks like we're going to have it now, and I do appreciate that. So thank you.
So I'm going to go to the speakers, and then we can have continue our robust conversation. As you were mentioning, Councilman Waring, about to Chris, are we going to continue this, or we're not going to continue this? I asked for it to come to this meeting since giblets come through our committee meeting, but we will be having a study session in June for the full council or the whole council to discuss that. So, do I read off the speakers, or is someone reading off the speakers?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Corey Williams will read off our speakers this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Our first speaker is Joshua Wells. Joshua, are you on the line?
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. My name is Joshua Wells. I am a resident of District 4, and today I will be speaking on behalf of CASE, or Central Arizonans for a Sustainable Economy, summarizing a letter submitted by us and community allies regarding this giblet discussion. We do not support the current method of granting government property lease excise tax agreements by the City of Phoenix. They are not appropriate for luxury commercial developments like the Astor Project, and they tilt development towards the needs of luxury commercial developers instead of what our community needs. We are fine with giblets being used for development that benefits the Phoenix community and working families, such as affordable housing projects, grocery stores and food deserts, shops for local retailers or small businesses, or projects that create publicly accessible parks and green space. We are not okay with giblets being used for luxury commercial projects like luxury hotels. They provide little to no benefit to our community while negatively impacting traffic, air quality, water usage, waste, and more. Also, in 2018, the downtown Phoenix Elementary School District came up publicly against the use of giblets in downtown Phoenix after they caused a budget shortfall for the school district and unfairly raised the taxes of small businesses and other tax-paying residents. In light of all this, we respectfully urge you as representatives of our city to enact a moratorium on giblets for luxury commercial developments. Signed, CASE, Central Arizonans for a Sustainable Economy, Unite Here Local 11, Sierra Club Palo Verde Group, Grand Avenue Arch and Preservation, Fuerte Arch Movement, Poder Latinx, Kimber Lanning, CEO of Local First Arizona, Dr. Alicia Vink, Governing Board Member of the Phoenix Elementary School District, Reginald Reggie Carrillo, Governing Board Member of the Phoenix Elementary School District and founder of AZ Land, Carlos Chico Robinson, Education Chair for the Maricopa County Democratic Party and Board Member of the Arizona Education Association, and Jade Marie Reyes, former President of the Marcos de Niza Tenant Council. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Scott Natos Elliott.
Hi, my name is Scott Matos Elliott. I work for Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, and I am a resident of the city of Phoenix and a member of United here, Local 11. I'm here to urge you. I'm here to urge you to stop the giblet tax giveaway to luxury commercial development. I personally think our community needs more affordable housing, like especially with the families that are like have been impacted with the COVID-19 pandemic, with people losing wages and having a hard time like paying their rent. Especially since rent went this year went up by $100, which I personally think it should not have went up $100. It should have been like kind of like stayed away, but it did. And and I also think we need to like do more affordable housing complex, like more affordable housing for the working class people here in Phoenix. I'm fine with the giblets being used for development that benefits the Phoenix community for like all the reasons I've said, but I'm not okay with the giblets being used for luxury commercial projects like the Astra project, for example. We want a moratorium on the giblets for luxury commercial development. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Carmen Quintana.
Hola. My name is Laura, and I'm going to translate for Carmen. She's going to speak in Spanish. Mi nombre es Carmen Quintana. My name is Carmen Quintana. Y trabajo en HMS Host. And I work at HMS Host. Soy residente de la ciudad de Phoenix. I'm a resident of the city of Phoenix. Y soy miembro del Unite Here Local 11. And I'm a member of Unite Here Local 11. Estoy aquí para decirle a ustedes de detener las donaciones de impuestos de GIPLES. And I'm here to tell you to not use GIPLES. A desarrollos comerciales de lujo for luxury commercial development. Personalmente creo que nuestra comunidad necesita viviendas más accesibles. I think that our community needs more affordable housing. Yo pienso que es mejor en usar estos fondos. I think it's important to use these resources para ayudar a gente que no tiene casa y no tiene seguro médico. To help people who are struggling with housing and who don't have insurance. Cosas que ayuden a la comunidad. And other things that help the community. Estoy de acuerdo con que las GIPLES I'm fine with giblets. Se utilicen para el desarrollo de beneficio a la comunidad de Phoenix. Being used for projects that benefit the community in Phoenix. Y las familias trabajadoras. And working families. Como los proyectos de viviendas accesibles. Such as affordable housing. Pero no estoy de acuerdo que los GIPLES se utilicen para proyectos comerciales de lujo como el proyecto de Astra, por ejemplo. But I am not okay with giblets being used for luxury commercial development, for example, like the Astra project. Queremos una moratoria sobre los GIPLES para el desarrollo comercial de lujo. Gracias por tu tiempo. We want a moratorium on giblets for luxury commercial development. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Mariah Sierra. Mariah's not on the line. The next speaker is Castaneda.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Kat Castaneda, and I'm basically a concerned member of the Phoenix community. I live in District 4. And my reason for being on here is pretty much the same as some other folks, is that I want to see an end to taxpayer-funded giblet giveaways, particularly for the luxury, commercial projects, apartments, condos. I've watched these developers come in and squeeze out entire neighborhoods, and then those people have no affordable housing to go to when they are squeezed out of their homes. And I think it's time that we stop paying these people to do those kind of things and start requesting that they pay their own way for starters, but also that they just, if they are going to build condos and apartments that are luxury, that normal working people cannot afford, 10%, 5% of 300 condos or 500 condos is not a lot of working family condos. Let's be real about that. And they can afford that. They can afford to put these buildings up all over the country, because it's not just here, and we know that. So if they can afford to pay all over the place to build these things, they can afford to pay their own way. And that's pretty much all I have to say on this.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lourdes Soria. Lourdes, are you on the line? Chair and council members, we're just waiting on an interpreter for Lourdes. Okay, we're going to move on. Next speaker is Tomika Brown.
City of Phoenix and a member of Unite Here Local 11. I'm here to urge you to stop giblets to tax giveaways to luxury commercial developments. I personally think our community needs more affordable housing. Personally, I'm not able to support any type of housing right now. Just with the little I make, even with my kids' help. So that's an issue for me. I am fine with the giblets being used for developments that benefits for everyone, especially those who's in my position right now, and working families, such as affordable housing projects for all reasons that I said above. As I said, the giblets are being used for luxury commercial apartments like the Astor project. We want a momentum and giblets for luxury commercial development. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Leonola Delone.
Leonilla, ¿está en la línea?
Leonila está en la línea. Sí, sí estoy en la línea.
Gracias.
Le escuchamos. Sí, sí estoy en la línea. Sí, le escuchamos. Puede proceder con su comentario. Ok. Yo la voy a traducir. Mi nombre. Ok, gracias. Mi nombre es Leonila Bailón. Trabajo en la universidad. Soy residente de Phoenix. También soy. Permítame. Vamos a hacer pausas mientras le traduzco. My name is Leonila Bailón. I work in the university. Soy residente de Phoenix. I am a resident of Phoenix. Soy residente. Y soy miembro de la unión del local 11. I am a member of the local union 11. Y también estoy aquí para hacer mi opinión sobre el incentivo que se ocupe para uso de la comunidad de bajos recursos. Para escuelas. I'm also here to give my opinion about the incentive and how I would like for it to be used. Continúe. Para las escuelas, para vivienda, para proyectos de que sean de beneficio para la comunidad, para las familias de escasos recursos. I would like the incentives to be used. I would like the incentives to be used for school districts, projects that benefit the community, and affordable housing. Esto es un beneficio para la comunidad de Phoenix y no para los proyectos de lujo. We would like these incentives to be used to benefit the community of Phoenix and not for luxury commercial entities. Por eso estoy aquí para dar mi opinión para la ayuda de incentivo para la comunidad de Phoenix. That's why I'm here to give my opinion about how the incentives should be used in ways to benefit the community. Es todo, gracias. That is all, thank you.
Our next speaker is Don Amenden. Okay, our next speaker is Julius Walters.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julius Walters. I work for the Renaissance in downtown Phoenix. I'm also a member of the Unite Here Local 11. Some of the speakers here have already made their point to urge the Stop to Giblets tax giveaway to luxury commercial developments. So I would also like to express my concern as well. I'm also fine with giblets being used for development that benefits the Phoenix community. Also working people with families and those lower income who live paycheck to paycheck. But the giblets being used for luxury commercial projects does not do so. I would also like to point out that we're still in a pandemic, and during these times, everyday people need to take priority and not big companies. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Nicholas Cicilline.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Cicilline. I work at the Westin Hotel in downtown Phoenix, and I'm a member of the Unite Here Local 11 Union. Like the other speakers, I'm here to urge the City Council to stop giblet tax giveaways to luxury commercial developments. I think the community downtown needs more affordable housing. Personally, I lived down until 2 years ago. At which point I was no longer able to afford rent there and had to move somewhere else. I am okay with giblets being used for development that benefits the Phoenix community and working families, such as affordable housing projects. But I do not agree with using giblets for luxury commercial projects like the Astor project. I want a moratorium on giblets for luxury commercial development. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Corinne McClemens.
Hi, my name is Corinne McClemens, resident in District 1. My family moved to Phoenix in 2013 because the cost of living was too high where we were in Michigan. It took me 8 years, 4 apartments, and an unexpected financial windfall just to have the privilege of being able to purchase a home here. And I did all this because my family fell in love with Phoenix. Phoenix is where we wanted to put down roots. My children are even currently attending college here. That's why it's so important that you put an end to these taxpayer-funded giblets for luxury commercial developments. You were all elected here by voters like me because we believed that you would serve and enrich our communities. But when you vote to use my tax dollars as freebies to coddle luxury commercial developers, who, by the way, will still build and develop here, history has shown that, you are voting to actively drive out working class families, single parents, and young people who are just starting out. Over the past year, we've come to know most of those people as essential people. You know, you are voting to price out my family's ability to build a future here in Phoenix. And I love my children more than anything, but I'm sure you guys can all appreciate the fact that I don't want them living with me forever. And with the skyrocketing costs of living, I'm just afraid that when the time comes in a few short years, their only option is going to be planting their roots somewhere else. That is why you need to end giblets for luxury commercial development here in Phoenix and focus on building up who already lives here and what we already have. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marcella Mars.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Maricela Mares. I'm 23 and currently live in District 8. I've lived throughout Phoenix my entire life. Most of that time has been spent in South Phoenix. The City Council needs to ban giblets for luxury commercial projects because luxury developments are not worth the price that local and working people like myself have to endure. Over the past 3 years, I've had to move around frequently as the price of renting has skyrocketed. There is no affordable housing for working people like myself. I'm forced to rent at these quote unquote luxury apartments that aren't worth the price I'm paying. Housing aside, these developers are using these handouts to ruin families and the vibrant cultures of Phoenix. I have fond memories of going to Sing Hai Chop Suey House on First Ave in Madison with my friends throughout high school. All those shared meals and laughs are just memories now because that business is gone. After 90 years, this family-owned restaurant closed down to make way for even more luxury retail developments. I fear what this money-hungry practice will do to the hundreds of families that live and work along Central Avenue as the light rail continues. I ask you to stop giving these luxury developers money to protect my access to affordable housing and the life that I've gained living in South Phoenix. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brendan Walsh.
Okay, hello. I assume you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Brendan Walsh. It's nice to see you all this morning. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the chair, Councilwoman Pastor, and all the other council people for members for their very thoughtful attention to this issue. As you can imagine, I also would call for a moratorium on giblets for luxury commercial development. But I just wanted to point, and I won't say too much given the fact that many people here have put it more eloquently than I would. But I would like to just point out some elements of the city's presentation, which I found a little bit, sort of troublesome, if not disingenuous. Number one is that when the slide 22 of the presentation, which talked about the economic benefits to the city of these giblets, it does imply that these developments would not have been built without giblets. And I don't know that there's really any evidence or data that proves that that's not the case. And I know Ms. Mackey does the financial analysis, and Ms. Mackey, one of the smartest people that we see around. I just disagree with the presentation. I don't disagree with the fact that you've done these analyses. The other thing I find troublesome is that when we're talking about still having the need to subsidize sort of larger multifamily market rate housing, it's curious that we're talking about the fact that, you know, the demand should be there to build it itself. As you were saying, the rents are starting to approach that. But also, when we're then saying we have to use GIPLETs to stimulate office space, it's kind of curious that if it's only commanding $30 a square foot, we certainly don't need to create more inventory if there's not the demand to have the prices high. And then the last piece I want to talk about is the people want to live near work, and that 15% of people use their bikes, et cetera. And I think Maricela just said that. Yes, of course, people want to live near work, but increasingly, as rents go up, we are, like, regular working people are not able to afford to do that. I guess that means I'm out of time. But I do want to say the last thing, the Central Station development
complete your
did not...
thought?
Yes, this last sentence. The Central Station development never intended to have any workforce housing until we campaigned for it. They insisted that they would not do it until they finally conceded to the 5% or 10%, whatever it was. And these numbers of workforce housing are incredibly low.
Thank you
and
for
they're
your time.
basically laughable.
Our next speaker is Beatrice Moore.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Beatrice Moore. I'm the director of Grand Avenue Arts and Preservation and also a business owner along Grand Avenue. We personally have created a number of renovated spaces along Grand Avenue without any subsidies in order to create our projects over the last 27, 30 years. GIPLETs create unfair competition between businesses. This is something that I did not hear mentioned as a downside. A new hotel project or housing or office space can provide much cheaper product because they are being subsidized. I'm not surprised that Fry's is completely filled up. They're a brand new project that got subsidized. They can offer their office spaces for cheaper than anywhere else because of the subsidies. Secondly, how much more luxury real estate do we need downtown? How about subsidies for affordable housing or other needed affordable space? Many residents and downtowners are getting pushed further and further out and can no longer live downtown. Downtown is indeed becoming a very elite place. Just the requirement that GIPLEted projects have to increase the property's value dramatically also pushes up property values close by. The city may think that's a good thing, but for those wanting to live or own property in the central city, not so much. Not enough, nearly enough workforce housing is being required to be put in these new projects, and not much longevity attached to those units. For residents and business owners, rising property values are not a plus. They mostly push property taxes up and push those of us who would like to stay downtown out. The unwalkable mega blocks that we created in the 1990s have now become a sea of block after block of expensive loft projects sandwiched close together, making a very unwalkable, very unpleasant pedestrian experience downtown. The density of building downtown at this point of time makes it surprising that GIPLETs needed, especially for luxury. The developers building these projects are well able to construct their
Please complete
projects
your thought.
without GIPLETs. It's time.
Our next speaker is Ryan Boyd.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, members of subcommittee. Ryan Boyd, for the record, a downtown resident at 1069 West Taylor Street, speaking on my own behalf as just an individual, and really here conflicted because there are some significant cases where I've had very high concerns about the GPLET. And the thing about GPLETs is that if you ask a developer, is this necessary? They're always going to say yes, because to say no would be to kind of blow the idea that it's not in violation of the gift clause. So it's always required a critical eye, and it's been a challenge. But the thing is that GPLETs can be good uses for helping create the more vibrant downtown that we want, and really to start to actually develop more units of affordable housing and workforce housing, and really hopeful to see the redevelopment area outside the central business district also get some more of those GPLETs that are designed for that missing middle. Because I think what's been discussed previously, including by the councilman from District 2, is the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that there's probably a lot of people that would love to live in downtown Phoenix. But simply put, the rents and the housing prices here are through the roof. And it is not possible. And in a lot of ways, it's not really easily possible to bicycle or walk through lots of this city without without some of the improvements that need to be done with tree and shade, with better complete streets, because we design our streets so that somebody can drive from Scottsdale to live in some luxury tower here, rather than designing it so that the downtown core is a ecosystem to itself that people can definitely come and visit. We want people to visit, but we don't want to prioritize those people that can just live in one tower and speed through the community to the next over those that are living in the central city village, which has historically been
Please complete your
undershaded,
sentence.
underfunded, and really has that kind of scenario. So I think if you put it on a level playing field, when you don't.
Our last speaker is Sandy Villatoro.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Sandy Villatoro Puro. I work at the Sheraton Phoenix downtown and a resident of Phoenix and a member of the Unite Here Local 11. I'm here to urge you to stop Giblets tax giveaway to luxury commercial developments. I personally think our community needs more affordable housing. From personal experience, my family has been looking for a place to live because our current housing situation is too small for our growing family. And it is impossible to afford anything nowadays because even with 2 incomes, you still struggle to pay the rent and the bills. And every time any apartment goes through a quote-unquote transformation, rental properties think they have the right to raise the rent $300 more. And it goes up every time there's a quote-unquote transformation, even if it's not to the apartment itself, but the property. I'm fine with GIPLAs being used for development that benefit the Phoenix community and working families, such as affordable housing projects, but I am not okay with GIPLAs being used for luxury commercial projects, like the Astor project, for example. We want a moratorium on GIPLAs for luxury commercial developments. Thank you for your time.
Chairwoman, that was our last speaker.
Thank you. I have some questions. Where did I write my questions? One of the questions that came before me, Chris, is, and it's on the absorption study. Why did we expand it?
Madam Chair, I'm so glad you asked that question. I had someone in the audience ask me the same question. So as we were working with the subcommittee at your March 24th meeting, the reason that we looked at that expanded area is we were looking at an area that could be connected and walkable. So instead of just that small box, like we do with the workforce housing, we expanded it as we look at the office that's down with the 19th Avenue with the state office buildings and kind of east on Washington and Jefferson where we're seeing new multifamily come up and new businesses go in. So we adjusted it just based on an area that was very connected, both with our office development and with our new multifamily development, and was also connected with transit or future transit.
So the reason why we expanded is because of the future expansion of the light rail is what I'm gathering.
Madam Chair, yes, that, and you're exactly right, that, and then also the growth of some of the development, or the existing office development that is west on Washington, that we typically don't include in our office development numbers.
Okay, because I'm trying to think what existing office development went west that is new. So,
Madam Chair, nothing that was new, but just kind of showing those are the number of jobs that are in that particular area that would live or work in downtown. So while we don't see any new multifamily coming up around the Capitol Mall, you have a number of individuals who work in those buildings that are looking for residential opportunities and that type of thing. So I believe as we were having that conversation at your March 24th meeting, we kind of talked through all those items as to why we would expand it to that area.
Okay. Is there a timeline on the workforce and affordability? When we provided GIPLET, does it end the 9th year?
Madam Chair, the way our agreements are written, it sunsets when the GIPLET sunsets. That's correct.
All right. And then my final question that was asked to me, is there any relationship between between the GIPLET and the development fund? And are they both tools for economic development?
Yes, Madam Chair. So the GIPLET and then the Downtown Reinvestment Fund that is under the council's purview that you use to provide development across all of Phoenix. The Downtown Development Fund, when as we take our development agreements forward to council, we are taking those properties as the owner of the property from the private property owner, and they are renting those properties back from us. So the development agreement and the letters of intent that the council sees coming forward require that development community to pay rent on the property for the term of the GIPLET. That rent is deposited into the Commercial Reinvestment Fund, which the council then uses to provide other community benefits across all of Phoenix.
Okay, because so it's basically they are paying into the it's paying into the downtown, what did you call it? Reinvestment fund.
Correct.
And how is it balanced, or it's funded by, if I'm understanding correctly, by the lease or the rent?
That's
the
correct.
Lease of the property.
That's correct. That
And
is one of the funds that goes into the Commercial Reinvestment Fund would be for the GIPLET leases on private development, those lease amounts that the private development community pays for the term of their lease while the property's under the city's ownership.
Okay. Can you provide the community, or not the community, or where can we find what list of projects have been funded and at what level?
Absolutely.
Is that possible to find it on the internet, or on the website, or anywhere?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it's not in a concise location. Those projects are funded at public city council meetings utilizing that fund, so they're publicly noticed in the agenda that those projects would be utilizing that fund. And so it all happens in a very public venue, but Madam Chair, we'd be happy to put together the list of those projects and get that to you.
Okay, so see, this is just a sidebar, but see, my argument of keeping our assets is definitely, especially the assets in downtown, would help with the reinvestment fund. But that's another sidebar conversation. What I have to say is I heard what constituents were asking for. This is a discussion on GIPLET and the downtown absorption rate study. We will have a bigger and larger conversation with the full council in June to discuss what we consider as a council a community benefit, and if GIPLETs continue or not. That's the bigger conversation for us, for the committee, was to understand the downtown absorption rate study that we asked for, and then give us a discussion about the GIPLET to prepare us for a bigger conversation. Does any of my colleagues have a question, or do they, on my packet, if you guys want to make some suggestions that we talk about in the study session?
Madam Chair, I think, I guess the bigger question is we don't have a lot of economic tools for incentives to incentivize people. And so I want to maybe broaden, and I know we can use development agreements sometimes, and I know we've used the CFD to help with Creighton University. So maybe we could talk about what else is out there for us. If Chris, you could do some research on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That'll be good. Councilman Waring, do you have any comments or anything?
I'll just say what I guess I've been saying for probably 15, 16 years. I'd like to end the use of GIPLETs. So for me, I don't know that there's improving. I know the legislature has maybe moved the ball in the right direction in the last few years, but overall, I'd like to see us get out of this subsidy business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are we okay to move to the next item? Is everybody okay just to get pushed through?
I am, yes.
I am too, yes.
Okay. So
Thank you.
the item is vacant commercial properties and opportunities for.
Chris Mackey, as well as our Planning and Development Services Director, Alan Stevenson, and our Neighborhood Services Director, Spencer Self. And I'll turn it over to Chris to start us off.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, this is a continuing discussion asking for an overview of our vacant commercial properties and opportunities that we have for reusing them. As we look at, we're going to go into a little bit of a background and then move forward. So we kind of have pre-COVID and after COVID as we look at these vacant storefronts. Pre-COVID, we were really seeing a retail revolution. We saw a lot of advances in technologies that caused people to shop in different manners. We found brands and retailers becoming irrelevant, brands that we never thought would close, or we found that those smaller, very specialty retailers were absorbed into larger retailers, and things started to significantly shift. We saw consumer behaviors change significantly. Younger shoppers wanted an Instagrammable moment. They wanted to be able to have more of a social environment when they were shopping, as opposed to just going into some of the retailers and doing their shopping. And social media became a big focus in driving people in shopping. Since COVID, I don't know about you, but everybody I know now buys their groceries online. Not me. I still like to pick mine out myself. But e-commerce has become a significant competition. I really think that we saw what would have normally happened by a market maturation over a 5 to 10 year period of time, and a natural progression was forced by the pandemic to happen in a 5 to 10 month period of time because of those in-person restrictions. And what we found was a number of our commercial and retailer users weren't able to pivot during the pandemic and just couldn't figure out how to do online shopping, couldn't figure out how to draw customers back into their stores. So we saw that significant change. Going back even pre-pandemic and more years ago than I care to admit that I was actually around in economic development for this, we look at Phoenix, and not just the city of, but in this instance we'll talk about the city of. If we look across the entire United States, the average square feet per capita of retail space is 28 square feet. In the city of Phoenix, we're just over 40 square feet per capita, and we're not the highest of the cities across the region. So what that says to us is, as the market continues to evolve and the market continues to shift, some of that retail can't be retail any longer. And those neighborhoods and those neighborhood markets, those former malls, they really need to evolve. And as the council looks at items, those areas will evolve into workforce and affordable housing, destination mixed use, schools, jobs, different types of retail establishments, and many other things as they move forward. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Alan Stevenson now to look at some of the reasons why we see these buildings really struggling. Alan?
Thank you, Chris. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. When you look at a lot of the 60s and 50s when zoning was created in the county, and so every corner, and then even the brand new ones that have much less commercial, and that's really the zoning and development patterns working with the marketplace and evolving over time. But where we have that zoning that has a legacy that is there, that's created an abundance of commercial zoning in area, which in doing so, it doesn't meet the code requirements when as market trends have evolved, they're requiring different building infrastructure on the site. And then, of course, as Chris mentioned, a lot of the underperforming malls, they're older, and that's not where consumers want to go. It's not that great third space, Instagrammable area that that they were when I was a kid and used to hang out at Metro Center Mall. That's not how the kids are doing it these days, and with that evolution of e-commerce, there just is those malls really need to look at what else can be done to bring them forward. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to talk about the retail market here, and then we'll go on.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, if we look at the city of Phoenix, we have about a 68 million square feet of retail space. Our vacancy rate is currently 8.3%. It was about 6% pre-pandemic. Just to put that in perspective, though, that's actually pretty good. If we look across the country, the average vacancy rate you see across the country lingers up near 20%. So Phoenix is actually doing better than a lot of other areas across the country. And then we look at our big box inventory, and what economic development for the city considers our big boxes are those buildings, those single user buildings that are 20,000 square feet or above. So we have 38 big box opportunities here in the city of Phoenix. 4.8 million are representing 4.8 million square feet. And of those properties, 19 big boxes are vacant. So when you look at those big boxes, they're the ones that are the most troubling, because not only is the big box vacant, but it begins to suck the life out of the smaller retailers that are within line near them and in line around surrounding corners with them as well. So the big box inventory is something that we do keep a very close pulse on top of. And as we look at our retail market and how we are utilizing some of those vacant big boxes, they are in a multitude of different ways, and our developers and owners in a multitude of really creative ways of repurposing those. So some are temporary or seasonal. You see those Halloween costumes prop up around the area, and other short-term uses. But in repurposing, a significant amount we're seeing today are uses that we call funtertainment, which are those fun entertainment concepts that are taking, it might be, the trampoline or the flying spaces or rock climbing walls or other areas in these vacant old grocery stores or big boxes. Health and fitness is becoming a strong focus in moving more into that neighborhood retail, but we're also seeing some e-commerce and fulfillment want to move into some of those vacant big boxes. They're getting closer to the community so that they can do that just in time and last mile. In other words, when I order something online, I can get it in 30 minutes or an hour if they're in close proximity to me there. But also that niche retail, looking at what are very specific to the hyper-local communities that retail is located inside of. And as we look at our shopping centers, we see what exists here in the city of Phoenix. And if we look at our struggling centers, we have struggling shopping centers. We consider those with a vacancy of greater than 25,000 square feet. And in those struggling centers, where we have the centers with greater than 25,000 square feet vacant, we see those centers with most of our vacancy. You'll remember I told you it was 8.6% earlier, but those centers alone have somewhere between a 25 and 100% vacancy. And those struggling centers are represented in 28 properties across the 517 square miles of Phoenix that do recognize that 100%, up to 100% vacancy in their properties. And if we look at tenant examples as to how we can handle and accommodate for those truly struggling centers and others, we see interesting things. So even our big box retailers that are remaining successful, they're going into smaller establishments. So they might be 30,000 square feet today, but their new model shows 20,000 square feet. They don't want to relocate, but they need to give 10,000 square feet back to the landlord. And working with planning and development in our development community and neighborhood services, how do we accommodate now for this really oddly shaped 10,000 square feet? We're seeing a number of retail space go out for sublease space. So it's not just the vacancy rate that we see at 8.6%, but it's those centers where the master tenant's still paying the lease, and so it counts as occupied, but they are vacant spaces and causing those challenges in the community. Food and beverage And our grocery stores are taking more and more of those spaces as well in more of the micro concepts that we see moving forward. The city, at council's guidance and direction, has put significant efforts into helping already try to accommodate for some of those struggling areas. I remember when I first got to the city, Councilman Gates at the time and now Councilwoman Stark had a keen focus on North 32 and an area where the community really came together and set the model for how they wanted to work with the city and how they really wanted to help guide the city and cause development to happen and redevelopment to happen and branding campaigns to happen. Planning and development had that lead in looking at everything from zoning and streets and landscapes and setbacks and vacant big boxes. And the community, the council office, and planning and development produced a really great document that we all use today. If we look at 19 North, again, one of our hyper-focused micro areas, economic development and planning and development created first a retail, a marketing outreach effort, but then, of course, a much more robust effort led by Alan Stevenson and his planning and development team on creating a planning overview for the 19 North area. And then, of course, as we begun to lose some of the big box retailers, Costco, in the central city, we worked diligently to create a new marketing package that showed why the central city is underrepresented in destination retailers and why they should be coming back to this location. This particular marketing package has been incredibly successful for us in gaining the attention nationally from some retailers that are here. As we look at those continuing city efforts, we look at how we move forward, and we work closely with neighborhood services, the development community, the brokerage community, and planning and development, but more importantly, the council offices and the community efforts that are behind this in monitoring those vacancy efforts, really looking at trends, how they're shifting, particularly at hyper speed during the pandemic. We worked with a private brokerage firm, the Phoenix Commercial, that did an incredible job for us in mapping those vacant big box centers. They did that as a volunteer effort for our economic development team. And then looking at ways that we can assist those property owners in maybe helping them recognize that that property is not intended for retail in the future, and how can we reposition that. And as you see here with the presentation today, it's truly interdepartmental work between the council offices, city managers, planning and development, neighborhood services, economic development, streets, and others, but also a robust input from our community during those meetings. And I'd like to turn it back over to Alan, so as we have this conversation, to set the stage on some of the considerations that we are bound by and unable to overcome. Alan?
Thank you, Chris. So the first thing I want to talk about, there are a number of city programs and tools that we do use to try and help address these issues. One of those is development agreements. However, there have been, a couple of court decisions that really have placed some limits on how we use development agreements as it relates to the incentives that can be offered and the assistance to incentivize private development. So the City North and Shire's decisions most recently really put in a lot of background information and requirements that the city has to address when we are investing in private property and trying to ensure that what we are doing is not a violation of the gift clause and the public is getting something out of it. So those are requirements that are in there, but those are good requirements that help ensure that what staff is bringing forward to the council in these development agreements is addressing the legal tests that are required, and there's public benefit associated with each of those projects that's over and above just getting a project to be built and go forward. In a lot of cases, particularly when you're talking about redevelopment, there's a lot of challenges that are in place with those existing older properties, and so ensuring that they get redeveloped, does help the larger community in terms of not having a blighted center on the corner where landscaping isn't maintained, those things. But under those court decisions, there has to be greater, public benefit associated with those. And so those are all things that staff can bring forward and discuss, with the council and at the council's direction as part of the development agreements. The larger city programs that have been adopted include our adaptive reuse program, which focuses on adaptively reusing historic buildings and older buildings for particularly smaller businesses. It's been an enormously successful program for the city, and the council, as part of the proposed budget this year, has asked for some additional money to go into that program so that small businesses can apply for permit assistance through the Planning and Development Department if they're in the adaptive reuse program. It shows you how worthwhile and important that program is. Our permit by inspection program is one that allows for someone to come in and for minor remodel projects, be able to get an inspection and a permit process in a much quicker time frame instead of a traditional complete plan review and then also inspection. It happens in a more synchronized fashion. Our self-certification program is one of the best in the country and has expanded a number of times for a broad range of applicability in the city. We also have worked closely with Historic Preservation Office and Michelle Dodds and Chris Mackey in Economic Development on some conservation easements for historically eligible properties that were being reused, and because of some of the challenges that are associated with reusing those properties, we were able to get a conservation easement to protect some of that character that is slightly different in some cases from a true historic purpose, but nevertheless was important to the community to move forward. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Spencer, who's going to talk about some of our CDBG programs and other efforts.
Thank you, Alan. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, as you know, the Neighborhood Services Department oversees the city's allocation of community development block grants, which are intended to provide public services, a suitable living environment, and economic opportunities principally for low and moderate income persons. The funds are generally intended to be used by cities and nonprofits to benefit those individuals, but some funding can be used to assist for-profit businesses in very specific ways that also benefit low and moderate income persons. As you can imagine, because these are federal funds, there are significant limitations for this purpose, and it's generally considered risky. However, one of the economic development programs the city does currently fund with CDBG is our Neighborhood Commercial Rehabilitation Program that provides businesses forgivable loans for up to $150,000 for exterior facade improvements to improve the general appearance of the business and to attract customers. Additionally, I wanted to note that while we're generally discussing commercial businesses and use of these properties, there are also options for public facility acquisitions and improvements using CDBG funds that could be employed if these vacant commercial properties are used by nonprofits who serve the low and moderate income community as well. On this next slide, I will hand it back over to Alan. However, I wanted to mention that those CDBG programs that we were just discussing were designed to meet the purposes of HUD and general neighborhood uses and needs. However, we could apply a lens to adjust or expand those programs to address the particular needs related to these vacant buildings that we're discussing today. Alan?
Thank you, Spencer. So these are a couple of highlighted items to talk about ideas moving forward here, expanding our adaptive reuse program. Spencer talked about the CDBG program, the American Rescue Plan in terms of looking at the applicability of that to use for some short-term investment strategies on how to incentivize the revitalization of some of these struggling commercial areas. Obviously, we'd be looking at a community engagement effort associated with this, from the standpoint of reaching the various stakeholders. We certainly would need to talk to the development community, a multifamily community, as well as all the potential residents that may be impacted within an area to try and look at what might be some changes that we would look at doing in this particular area. The city beautification and infrastructure and kind of general fund bond support are really ones that will be a larger discussion that staff would put some parameters around and then come back and talk to the subcommittee and council about as it relates to the idea of at some of these smaller shopping centers, there are some significant infrastructure challenges that are an impediment to development. And if the city wants to look and try and make some of these areas more economically viable, to convert the land uses. In some cases, because of that zoning pattern, there's just too much retail, zoning in those areas, and it's not going to come back no matter how good Kristen and her team is. There just isn't enough retail, opportunities that are out there, and so we have to look at what other types of uses are out there. And in order to try and be thoughtful with that, some of the discussions then would certainly involve the community, but it also may, involve the city looking at how could we provide an incentive via infrastructure improvements for upgraded water, sewer lines, those kinds of things that weren't really built for, a change and might need to be upgraded, but we can try and use some money to make that happen in concert with a private development entity who wants to, for example, maybe take one corner of a four-corner intersection and try and convert that to multifamily, and working with residents around that area. But by having more rooftops in that area, that will support the other commercial in the area as well and make it easier for those properties to attract tenants and be viable commercial. In terms of the kind of beautification efforts, another example of that might be the city investing some money in additional trees and landscaping. As many of you know, and the council has brought up to me on several occasions, there are areas where there's not a lot of landscaping. There are older parts of the city. There's right-of-way that is out in those areas that, if there was money to put in landscaping, for example, that would be in that public right-of-way, beautify it for the larger city, but then in working with a private property owner who's revitalizing it, they could be the ones to maintain and take care of that landscaping as part of them doing private improvements to their project. There's a benefit there that would help incentivize that property to redevelop, but also have that larger community benefit of taking out this area that doesn't have any landscaping and looks kind of blighted to the community and getting a different use in that. And certainly also updating the zoning ordinance, looking at things that we could do to really address some different market trends for various uses that are coming into play these days, where Chris mentioned we have some just-in-time warehouse delivery type of activities that have a smaller retail component where you can pick things up, but then also function as a just-in-time distribution component as well. We have activities like that want to come into some retail areas that might make sense in some areas, certainly not in all of them. And then also we have these cloud kitchens where they are, because we've shifted a lot to ordering our food from apps and having it delivered, where they have a kitchen that will have multiple different restaurants that can serve food out of it, but they have a very small retail presence where you walk in. Mostly it is food delivery, and so it's 3 or 4 different restaurants that you can order food from, particularly in that one kitchen, but they don't do much in the way of your traditional, people sitting inside the restaurant eating. And so those are different types of uses that the zoning ordinance needs to really look at and work with the community on how we can evolve to address those, because they are things that the community wants to see on a much larger basis. With that, since we are short on time, we went through it quickly, but we're happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I asked for this discussion because I have been working along Hatcher Road with the commercial operator or owners, and they were trying to create excitement along Hatcher Road, but they stumbled upon a problem, and that was most of the buildings were built in the county before building permits. And so it is really stifling some of the owners in trying to do tenant improvements or try to sell their property to someone else who may want to take it over and do something. And I know that is not just a phenomenon of Hatcher Road, but I suspect other parts of the city. For example, Councilman Waring and along Bell Road between Cave Creek and 32nd Street, a lot of that was built in the county and may not have building permits either. So I really want to start exploring how we can improve our processes to encourage people to redevelop. So, Madam Chair, I like to, with your help and the councilman's help, try to convince our mayor that this is probably a worthwhile discussion with the entire council, because I don't think it's just happening along Hatcher Road or Bell Road. I suspect you probably have areas that are in need as well. I think I can think of lots of areas in every district, and I think it's worthwhile. And I know we'll have to have that discussion, because if we ask staff to start looking at some of these, we're going to violate the 8-hour rule. So that's why I put it on the agenda, to start the conversation and maybe get you guys enlisted so that we can ask our mayor to take a look at this comprehensively citywide.
Okay. Deb, would you recommend like doing not a study group, I mean more of a committee? I don't know what you would call it, a task force, I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah.
Whatever the term is, but.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I think that'd be great. I know I have one of the users on Hatcher Road. They have done a lot of great work, but she's afraid if she does anything else, she doesn't have a CVO, so she's afraid she can't go any further. But I know she wants to do terrific things, and so I think if we can have that discussion and then perhaps put together a task force.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay. Are you in agreement, Councilman Waring?
I am in agreement.
All right.
I'm always very agreeable. You know that.
Of course, always.
Your railroad needs some help, Jim.
A little inside council humor there, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right, so Alan, I guess our next steps is we'll figure out how we, well, not to figure out, we'll have a conversation with the mayor to bring this. Deb, I think the calendar's set for June, so would you want September?
Yeah, that'd be fine. I mean, I like to think a little bit and do a little more research into what we could do as well. I'll put my planner cap back on and think about it as well.
Do you think we should do an 8-hour rule piece, or we first, that way they can get started and like put it in June and have the conversation and then see if we can do an 8-hour rule?
Yeah, maybe that's the way to go. So the staff has some time over the summer. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I will, I'm assuming all three of us will have a private conversation and move it forward and hopefully get it into our June agenda.
Great. Thank you.
Those are all our, those aren't questions, Ellen. Those are just comments and everything, so we're gonna put you to work. Not that you haven't.
I understand, Mayor, and Councilwoman Pastor, we're happy to work with the mayor and council, study over the summer, and then we can talk in September as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, everybody? I lost all my notes. This is the last item. Are there anything else for future agenda?
Okay, Chairwoman Pastor and,
Yes.
and subcommittee members, we do have our next meeting scheduled for June 23rd. The current items that we have on there is a contract with Capital Management for 723 West Polk Street. That's American Legion site. Also, Theme Park District's Extension legislative update, Gaming Compacts legislative update, as well as potentially downtown building signage study, downtown kiosk, and anything else that you or the council members may have.
Okay, we'll look through all that.
Okay.
That's a big agenda.
Yes. And then
Okay.
Chairwoman Pastor, one other item to note, we did receive one comment card, not wishing to
Okay.
speak, by Robert Bob Graham, who was neutral on item 5, which was the GPLET discussion.
Okay. Does he want to speak, or you just want to put it on record?
Just to put it into record.
Okay. And I missed call to the public. Do we have any calls to the public?
Madam Chair, no calls to the public.
Okay. This was a great meeting. We went even overtime, which is surprising for us. So I would like to thank my colleagues for sticking around and being and finishing the conversation. And I will be adjourning the meeting. Thank you.
With rental and utility arrears, and up to 3 months for future rent or utility credits. Covered utilities are our electric, gas, and city water